Hey everybody, this is a prototype podcast project. Operation Iron and Ivy, a Psalm 40 production. Out of the Mire, a historical investigation series. When the Revolutionary War ended in 1783, the people of Salem rallied together for the colossal endeavor of rebuilding. Roads were severely damaged, farms were destroyed, and much of the livestock suffered from disease. All of the former trade networks had been disrupted. Yet the underlying culture of resilient and reliable men carried the region through recovery. Farmers continued improving their crops by experimenting with the new techniques, which led to South Jersey's commerce rebounding sevenfold. At the time, tomatoes had been widely feared as poison apples due to their relation to the nightshade family. And who do you call to conquer widespread fear? A war hero. Colonel Robert Gibbon Johnson, a prominent Salem farmer and War of 1812 veteran, became convinced that tomatoes were not only safe, but delicious and profitable. According to local legend, on a humid summer day in 1820, Johnson publicly consumed a full basket of tomatoes on the steps of the Salem courthouse. A band played as people watched in horror. When he survived, it broke the superstition and popularized the tomato as a staple food crop in America. By the 1830s, the people of Fenwick's 10th had not only recovered from the Revolution, but a whole new dimension of growth had presented itself. The old Quaker dream of building a unified, rational society, the New Atlantis spirit first carried by John Fenwick, was now expressed through patriotic ingenuity, experimental science, and commerce expansion, exactly as George Washington had been shown in the frozen dreamscape at Valley Forge. As the Quakers shifted their focus from religious reform to social reform, their communities became fertile ground for new ideological movements. They were among the first to ban slavery completely. Around 1800, Reuben Cuff, a free black man born in Lower Alloways Creek, began spreading Wesleyan Methodism. He organized the United Society for Religious Worship in a log cabin in Elsonboro Township. Cuff's congregation followed the typical Methodist structure with hymns, sacraments, and passionate preaching, but they sought autonomy from white-owned churches. Wesleyan Methodism was a branch of Protestant Christianity rooted in the teachings of John Wesley, emphasizing personal holiness and social justice. It originated as a renewal movement within the Church of England in the 1730s. John and his brother Charles Wesley established a methodical approach to faith that critics mockingly dubbed Methodism, similar to how the Quakers mockingly received their nominal title a century prior. The Wesleyan movement split into distinct branches once it reached the United States. Some converts of the original Wesleyan Methodist Church fractured off into the Methodist Episcopal Church in 1841, primarily due to opinions on slavery and concerns for the integrity of a truly methodical Episcopal system. In 1816, Reuben Cuff traveled to Philadelphia for a meeting called by another prominent Free Black Methodist leader, Richard Allen. At this gathering, the men formally established the African Methodist Episcopal Church, the AME, the first independent black denomination of the New World. Most of Cuff's Elsinboro congregation aligned with this new movement, but the decision came with repercussions. A portion of the original congregation preferred to stay within the established Methodist structure under white oversight, and they did not support the move to the new independent body. As a result, Cuff and his followers left the Elsinboro location. They relocated to Dick Moore's Corner in Salem and formally established Mount Pisgah AME Church. This kind of denominational split was common throughout the 19th century. Many religious groups wrestled with racial discrimination and limited autonomy within the established church systems. Richard Allen's AME Church offered full independence, black leadership, and the freedom of control, but it also meant breaking from the familiar, more established Methodist connection. While the ideological differences of the American Civil War continued to creep closer to home, the ideological differences among the communities were already polarizing. Quakers emphasized direct inner light revelation. They rejected outward sacraments, denied clergy hierarchies, and favored silent worship. The AME Church upheld established Methodist articles of religion, the sacraments of baptism and communion, and they delivered passionate, music-filled worship. Yet, both traditions, at their most foundational level, were rooted in social reform and universal human dignity. The community-wide opposition to slavery fostered productive cooperation efforts. Quaker social networks and shipping lanes provided safe passage for freedom seekers, while AME churches became blooming centers for community aid and free education. The tri-state area was a laboratory for American identity in the 19th century. Enlightenment ambitions, filtered through radical Protestantism, challenged old paradigms. Black churches like Mount Pisgah served as more than just houses of worship. They were the first schools and community aid centers. Together with Quaker activism, these temples of learning transformed the social landscape of the region, pushing the young Republic of Washington's vision toward its founding promise of liberty. As prosperity bloomed, in commerce and in community, the resilience of the land was a visible reminder that it had been home to the original people for thousands of years before any European ships arrived. Blessings come and go, but how you respond to them determines their effect. The region displayed its resilience once more during the War of 1812, when British raiders were harassing shipping lanes and came up the Maurice River. Local militia, including men from Salem and Cumberland, mobilized to defend the bay shore. One of those veterans was Colonel Robert Gibbon Johnson. They forced the Brits to retreat and would not see any more action from the War of 1812. It would be the Civil War, only 50 years later, that most clearly shaped the area's character. Despite its rural border state location, South Jersey remained staunchly pro-Union, thanks in large part to its Quaker abolitionist roots. Free black communities in Cumberland and Salem counties served as important stations on the Underground Railroad. The extreme polarity of the local social climate caused hundreds of local men to willingly enlist for the Civil War, many serving in regiments like the 12th New Jersey Volunteers. As the American Civil War progressed, the same Delaware River that had sustained John Fenwick's dream of a peaceful colony and later powered South Jersey's farms and oyster fleets, took on new strategic importance. America's growing industry cities, especially Philadelphia and Wilmington, needed protection. This led to one of the most impressive coastal defense systems in the United States. It all started on a muddy chunk of land in the middle of the Delaware River. According to legend, a ship loaded with peas wrecked offshore centuries ago. The sprouting plants trapped silt, gradually creating an artificial island, hence its name, Pea Patch Island. In 1813, during the War of 1812, the U.S. government seized the island, renamed it Fort Delaware, and occupied it to guard against British naval threats. Military engineers fortified the island with a labyrinth of walls and machines of war. According to historians, the early star-shaped design, overseen by Joseph Gilbert Totten, faced constant problems. The soft, marshy ground often led to collapsed walls and sunken foundations. Totten was among the first graduating class of the United States Military Academy at West Point, class of 1805. As a leading expert in military defense and combat engineering, most U.S. coastal forts to be erected in the 19th century were built under his direct command or secondary influence. The first rendition of Fort Delaware took nearly 15 years to complete. Then, in February 1831, a devastating fire destroyed much of the wooden interior. Some reports say the fire began in Totten's office. He was relieved of his post at Fort Delaware shortly after the inferno. Supposedly, every original structure on the island was destroyed, and it was practically abandoned for the next 17 years, until 1848, when the Army began constructing the much larger, current version of Fort Delaware, a massive, five-pointed, brick and granite fortress, one of the strongest in a system of American coastal defenses. Major John Sanders oversaw the revived construction operation. Engineers flooded sections of the island, then drove hundreds of wooden piles deep into the mud to create a stable foundation. It took over a decade to complete, reaching its final form around 1860, 47 years after the island's seizure. The fort could mount over 100 heavy artillery cannons and house just under 1,000 men. This floating juggernaut worked with companion forts on the shores of Delaware and New Jersey to create a deadly crossfire that would eliminate any threat heading upriver toward Philadelphia. During the Civil War, Fort Delaware became far more famous as one of the largest Union prisoner-of-war camps, holding thousands of Confederate soldiers over the span of the conflict. Meanwhile, as the nation continued to manifest across the New World, westward expansion led to the acquisition of Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Nevada, and California. These territorial gains were accelerated by the gold rush of 1848, which sparked massive migration and led to California's admission as a free state in 1850. South Jersey's abundant prosperity was the fuel for these Promethean flames. While innovation and progress was being pushed out from the Delaware Valley region, so were its people. By the mid-19th century, the original people, the Lenape, had largely been displaced from New Jersey. Some groups agreed to live on reservations, like in Brotherton, New Jersey, but this was short-lived. In 1802, the Brotherton Lenape sold their remaining land and relocated to New York and Canada. Although most of the original people had fled by this time, some chose to remain and integrate themselves into the new local community. Those who could endure would hide in plain sight by being reclassified in records as colored. Further Indian removal policies from the 1830s through the 1860s relocated any remaining Lenape who refused to invoke the American patriotic spirit. New Jersey saw rapid industrialization through sawmills, textile centers, canal digging, railroads, and factories. These operations involved heavy land development, resource extraction, and urbanization in areas that were formerly Lenape farms, villages, and hunting grounds. Such is the everlasting cycle of violence. The utopian New Atlantis dream had been tempered by migration, war, and politics, but the core values of innovation and society building lived on through the enterprising spirit of South Jersey. The biggest catalyst for change was transportation. In the early 19th century, the Delaware River was the main highway for trade. Ships carried grain, timber, and livestock to Philadelphia and Wilmington daily. But as the nation expanded westward, South Jersey needed better connections to larger markets. Canals and turnpikes helped, but it was the railroad that truly transformed the region. Beginning in the 1860s, lines like the West Jersey Railroad pushed south from Camden, reaching Salem, Bridgeton, and Millville by the 1870s. Suddenly, fresh produce could be rushed to big city markets in hours instead of days. This transportation revolution worked hand in hand with the agricultural explosion. The rich soils of Salem proved ideal for farming. Tomatoes, popularized decades earlier by Colonel Johnson, became king. South Jersey earned the nickname Garden Spot of the Garden State. Peaches, asparagus, sweet potatoes, corn, and berries followed. Entire train cars full of produce rolled north every harvest season. Alongside farming, new industries took root. In Cumberland County, east of Salem, the abundance of high-quality silica sand and timber fuel sparked a glass-making boom. Towns like Millville and Vineland became known for bottles, jars, windows, and tableware. Millions of glass containers were produced each year. The rise of commercial canning further amplified South Jersey's economy. Local farmers and factories could now preserve soups, vegetables, and fruits in glass jars and tin cans, shipping them across the country and even overseas. What had once been a reclusive Quaker society was now part of a modern economic machine. Alongside the fruitful harvest of the land, oystering and caviar processing became thriving industries in the Delaware Bay. By 1875, 200 years after the founding of John Fenwick's New Salem, the transformation was uncanny. The land Fenwick had once tried to shape into a holy experiment of peace and liberty had become one of the most productive early industrial regions of the New World. Farms, glass factories, canneries, and oyster fleets created steady prosperity. Towns like Salem, Bridgeton, and Millville grew into bustling county seats with banks, newspapers, churches, and town halls. The utopian dream had evolved. It was no longer a pure religious colony, but something more sensual, a society that blended Enlightenment ideals of reason with commercial success. The same spirit that drove Fenwick to cross the ocean in 1675 now expressed itself in scientific horticulture, steam engines, and large-scale production factories.